special guest, Suneet from Sebastian Fitness Solutions. And today we're going to be talking about IIFYM, if it fits your macros, versus clean eating. So basically I want to make sure that we're clearing up some misconceptions about IIFYM, or otherwise known as flexible dieting. And we're going to look at, is there really any credibility to that whole concept of eating clean or meal timing, food choices, etc. when it comes to physique transformation. But before we get into that, Suneet, thank you very much for joining us today. Can you please just give the viewers a little bit of introduction about yourself?
Hey Josh, thanks for having me over. It's a real pleasure. So my name is Suneet Sebastian, as Josh has mentioned, and my story starts off with me being this, geeky little kid back in high school who was bullied by just about everyone, and then a little pudgy on the a little on the fat side. So then, as I finished high school, I start getting this sudden interest in transforming my physique and getting in shape. So, and I was really dedicated. So the first thing that I thought of doing was, just let me just cut out all food entirely. Let me stop eating, and I just end up eating just salads and soup for the entire day and playing like 3 hours of basketball almost every day.
Oh no.
And the end result is I went from like 75 kgs of blubber down to less than 60 kilograms, and I looked like an anorexic little girl. And the funny thing is that I could see a set of six-pack in the mirror and this little lemon-sized bicep, and I was like very impressed by that and thought that I was in great shape. Little did it took me a little time to realize that in the end I was just like a skinny little twig. So finally I end up in the gym, like just about everybody else, looking to build some muscle, get some size on those scrawny little arms. And one thing I realized is that there was very little information that's out there, and any good information. And I was just stranded in the gym, and I would just do endless number of sets of bicep curls and tricep extensions. And I would just
there's plenty of information, but there's lots of misinformation.
There's not enough proper guidance. So fortunately, within a month into my training, I came across a seminar by a man who later on became my mentor. And the funny thing is that his seminar was on fat loss and the basic misconceptions about fat loss. And what resonated with me was that every single thing that he said, every point that he made, every mistake that somebody else makes, I did that. And he explained scientifically why that's a problem. And it really resonated with me because I was amazed because whatever I did, it took a lot of effort and a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication. But I realized that all of my hard work and dedication was put in the wrong direction, the wrong place. And if I had just known the science, and if I just known what to do when, then I would have been in a much better position than I was back then. So that led me to realize the importance of science and understanding understanding the facts behind training, behind nutrition, and that is what led me to my pursuit of it. And while studying for engineering in college, I was also simultaneously studying the various sciences in fitness, like kinesiology and exercise science and sports nutrition. And that's when finally, I used that to transform myself from that skinny, strong little fellow that I'm sure you can go to my site and you'll find that pic.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
You've seen it, right? So
I don't believe that's you. No, I just kidding.
Yeah, that was me. And funny thing is, I was actually skinnier than that at one point.
Wow.
Believe it or not. But yeah, from there to around 185 pounds and maintain my six-pack throughout the journey. And it took a while, maybe a couple of years, because it was completely drug-free. And it was a learning process throughout the entire time. But that's how I got there. And finally, using that information and collecting all that information, I came to a realization that this is something that I want to do. I want to do what my mentor did for me, and basically spread the knowledge of science out there to every eager fitness enthusiast who's ended up in the gym looking to transform himself and doesn't know where to go and doesn't know which person to rely on and what kind of information to rely on. And there's a lot of clutter that's out there. So that's my story.
Excellent. I'm sure that your experience of wanting to transform yourself when you're in your teens, not feeling good about your body, a lot of young people can identify with that, I'm sure. Well, I'm glad you're here to share some information with us today too, and spread your knowledge to my viewers as well. Without further ado, let's get into the topic of IIFYM. I just posted a short little video chatting about this on my YouTube channel recently. and we got a new discussion about it. And you had a wealth of information, or I really liked your perspective on this anyway. So I'm glad you're here to talk about that with us today. What would you, how would you introduce that topic, or what would be the first thing that you'd want to sort of make clear to people when they're talking about flexible dieting? Or I guess most people don't even look at it as that. They don't realize that IIFYM was sort of evolved from this idea of flexible dieting.
Yeah, well, the thing is that there's been a lot of debate recently, and a lot of, there's the war of words between these two clans of people, one that support quote-unquote clean eating, and the other that's usually the guys who follow science and guys who follow research and who have realized that if it fits your macros, or flexible dieting rather, has a lot of backup to it. A lot of people who are successful are also following it. So then it's kind of like attacking the idea, that the very long-held idea that you need to suffer and eat these bland foods all the time to get in shape. So that's what it's. At the end of the day, it's like a war that's going on between two factions. And what's happening is that, as in any war or any kind of fight, there's a lot of miscommunication and an exchange of many ideas which are not really true. So at the end of the day, the perspective is not very clear on it, and a lot of times the actual facts are not being put out there. So the first and foremost critique, or rather the main, if you look at it, the guys who follow clean eating, or who make sure that not a single gram of whatever they eat comes from any quote unquote junk food, their basic critique about if it fits your macros is that it allows you to eat any junk whatsoever as long as it fits your macros, which is partially a fault of them for not doing enough research, and partially a fault of the name itself. Whereas the name, if it fits your macros, is so misleading from the actual concept. The truth is that the concept of IIFYM, basically, the actual concept of it, or the people who actually promote it, say that the actual idea behind it is that as long as you're getting quality nutrients, as long as you're getting your micronutrients in, you're getting the amount of fiber you need, you're getting the amount of quality protein you need, and the essential fats, then you can get a certain portion of your calories, again, a certain portion, from quote-unquote junk foods. So that's the idea behind IIFYM. But the name doesn't suggest that at all. The name just makes it sound like they're just running after macros. That's it. So that's partially a fault of the name itself, which is the reason why the term flexible dieting is far more appropriate to describe it than IIFYM. But so at the end of the day, this is the problem. The problem is that there's a lot of miscommunication. So I'd like to go into that primarily.
Excellent. No, that's great. And I think part of the problem is also the people, some proponents of IIFYM, or who have sort of adopted it because it's become trendy, also may not understand what they're talking about when they're describing, if it fits your macros as well. So it's the people that are, the bro scientists, so to speak, who are proposing, clean eating is the only way to go, are having arguments with people who are in favor of if it fits your macros, but also don't understand it, and do believe that all it means is we can get all of our carbohydrates from Pop-Tarts if we want to, and all of our fats can be from quote unquote crap sources of nutrition. But that's important, I think, to realize that the flexible dieting is saying that we have a lot of calorie intake that we want to get in, and we want to make sure we're meeting certain nutritional requirements for our protein, fats, carbs, micronutrients, fiber within that calorie intake. Once we've met those minimal requirements, and we still have some calories to make up, what's the problem with having some, I guess what some people call treats or junk food? They're saying it's not junk. If we've met our nutritional requirements, enjoy some of that stuff along the way.
And if you look at it clearly, if you look at it from a certain perspective, you'll see that IIFYM of flexible dieting is probably 80% or 85%, maybe even 90% clean eating itself, and then a little bit 5% or 10% extra, maybe a little bit more. But if you are going to actually follow the premise of flexible dieting, you will end up having 85% of your diet as quote-unquote clean eating there itself. The problem is that when people find the concept that they can latch on to, a lot of people, there are certain people who defend certain diets a lot because it works for them, or they have seen exceptional results, or any kind of concept that really sticks with what they want. Sometimes you have these certain beliefs of your own and certain outcomes that you want yourself. So say if you've been somebody who's never been able to restrain from having a certain kind of food, and then you come across the concept of somebody coming and telling you that, oh, you know what, it's okay to eat junk food, then you psychologically try to gravitate to that, and then these people are the ones who end up claiming that, or end up misapplying the concept of IFYM, and then taking it and saying that, you know what, it doesn't matter what I eat as long as this way. But as any person who's properly understood IFYM and actually practices it, preaches it, has clearly stated that it's maybe most of it is actually clean eating with a little bit of something on the side, and not really what people think of what it is.
Mm-hmm. But the junk food portions make better Instagram and Facebook pictures, so that's what everyone sees. They're post pictures of bacon and Pop-Tarts and chocolate bars with hashtag IIFYM. So it's been associated as a junk food diet when that's a complete misrepresentation.
Exactly, and this is again, I would still say it's a partially the fault of a person who understands the concept, because what happens is that when you're famous for touting a certain concept and being different or sticking out, you tend to highlight that over other things that like if a guy who's known for propagating IFIM and who's standing behind it, he's probably going to show him practicing or eating junk rather than show himself eating the rest of his meals, right? So what happens is that it's not wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but the problem is that he's trying to show basically. But the problem is that somebody who's following him will look at that and say, you know what, Mr. XYZ, who's in great shape, or who basically lives and breathes flexible dieting, is having this certain meal. So maybe I can have the same whenever I want, no matter what my and that's what happens is that people misapply certain advice or certain practices that are performed by other people. So at the end of the day, I would not say it's a problem with the concept itself, but rather the way people interpret it and the way the message is sent across.
Absolutely. So let's get into that a little deeper now. The proponents of clean eating will argue that meal timing and food choices, the type of carbohydrate, like low glycemic carbohydrate versus high glycemic, all have an effect on body composition, whereas many proponents of flexible dieting will typically downplay that to a certain extent. At least from my conversations with people that are, hardcore, if it fits your macros guys, will argue that it does not matter when you eat, what you eat. You could eat it all in one meal a day, hit all your macronutrients requirements, your caloric requirements, and that's fine. You could eat it at midnight. That, and there's definitely I've tried out intermittent fasting for a while as well, and it does sort of make sense that eating every 3 hours is a little bit strict, regimented, and that might not be necessary. There might be advantages as far as blood sugar and whatnot, but it doesn't speed up your metabolism. It does. So there's a lot of misconceptions around that. So let's get into food choices, like low GI carbs versus high GI carbs, and meal timing as two specific things which I think a lot of people sort of hype on. Now, is that a load of crap? Is meal timing all baloney and like a fairy tale? And like, does it matter what kind of carbs you get as long as you're hitting your nutrient ratios for carbohydrate? What's your view on that?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very, very good point, because I think the biggest critique that or any kind, the first point that the clean eating guys put forth when it comes to any debate with if it fits your macros is usually the effect on insulin and high GI carbs and low GI carbs. Well, when it comes to that specifically, it's pretty clear that the glycemic index system itself is majorly flawed, because when you measure the glycemic index of a certain food, or certain carbohydrate rather, it's done just by eating purely that kind of carbohydrate, which is not emulating a real life scenario when you'll be eating a meal which will include carbohydrates, a certain amount of protein and fat as well. And we know that including a certain amount of protein and including a certain amount of fat especially will drastically change the glycemic response of a certain meal.
Then we get into
the glycemic index.
We get into talking about glycemic load then.
Yeah.
Versus index, yeah.
Yeah, no, even then, yes, even then, but the idea is the insulin secretion would not be as, say, if you ingest 50 grams of sugar by itself, yes, there's going to be a stark insulin response. But if you're going to ingest say 50 grams of sugar along with say casein protein and maybe a little bit, maybe some nuts. It's a mixed meal, right? So suddenly it's not going to have the same insulin response. So when it comes to the debate as to the food, whether which foods affect a certain meal and its connection with insulin, that's not really a very strong point, because it's kind of proven that insulin response is going to be very dependent on the composition of your meal. And if your meal is a normal meal, a mixed meal of containing more than just the carbohydrate, the insulin response is not going to be as stark as what we would see on the glycemic index. So that point itself is void. Does that mean that meal timing or the composition of your meals does not matter at all? Absolutely not. People tend to focus too much on the direct effect of certain thing on body composition. Well, if you're probably eating a certain amount of food, making sure that the macros are the same, probably not going to affect your body composition directly by a lot. But say, let me just compare. Okay, before I go into that point, that's something that I want to keep for later on. But let's compare a certain food, right? Let's compare, for example, eating, a normal meal, which we're trying to get certain amount of fat, right? So we try to, in one meal, and a clean meal, we try to get a certain quantity of fat from, say, nuts. On the other hand, we're eating a cheat meal, where you are getting probably the fat in there is going to be a considerable amount of saturated fat or trans fatty acids if you're eating something that's highly processed. So over there, if you're getting the same amount of dietary fat from, say, 20 grams or 25 grams of dietary fat in one meal, in a clean meal from nuts and good fat sources, as opposed to saturated and trans fatty acids, then it's pretty clear that it's not going to be the same. And maybe carbohydrates not so much, but protein and fat, the quality of the nutrient does matter quite a lot. So to say that meal composition doesn't matter at all, I wouldn't say that's entirely true. And it would be a very, I think it would be a very simplistic or a very minimalistic look at, maybe you're just observing your immediate effect on body composition rather than the overall impact on the body itself.
Right, and we got a little bit into effect on insulin, of carbohydrate intake on insulin. What's your take on the argument of hormonal effect of foods? I mean, in my point of view, I mean, that there is definitely the food choices, the type of food you eat, as far as the ratios of fats to carbs, does have an effect on different hormones. In which cases does that significant enough to impact your progress? In which cases is it sort of overplay, exaggerated a little bit? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I'll make a very honest statement saying that my knowledge in endocrinology isn't really that strong where I can make a statement as unequivocally and as confidently as I do with training. But I will say that I will probably give you guys, anybody who's watching, just try and observe or try to think of a time when you're eating a meal that has a lot of, say, processed carbohydrates, or you're having, say, if you're trying to get, this is a perfect example actually. Say you are trying to eat a pre-workout meal, right, before you're going to go into the gym, and you want to get maybe, say, around 60 grams of carbohydrates in. So if you take that same quantity, everything else being constant, making sure that the protein, you're going to eat it with protein, of course, but your protein source is going to be the same, but you're going to just replace your carb source as 50 grams of sugar or 50 grams of any processed simple carb, as opposed to 50 grams of complex carbs through any other source. The way you feel during the workout, the way you perform during the workout, how full you feel, and also the effect on the way your mood, your performance is going to be considerably different. Let's take the example of the neurotransmitter serotonin. It has the amount of carbohydrates you ingest, the type of carbohydrates you ingest has a significant effect on your serotonin levels. And serotonin is a neurotransmitter basically which makes you feel good and sleepy, a little, So say you're eating a meal which is a little high in carbohydrate, even though your entire daily macros are the same. You're eating a meal which is slightly higher in carbohydrates as opposed to another. The effect on serotonin is going to be different, and probably it's going to affect your performance in the gym. Not for everybody, but for somebody definitely.
Isn't
Guess it depends.
serotonin? Sorry to interrupt. Isn't serotonin the hormone that after sex it's pretty high too? At least
I think
I've
no.
read that. I think.
I think that's oxytocin. I think so. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
well, people can Google that. Anyway, that's how
Serotonin
I feel
serotonin
after.
is
I feel satisfied and sleepy after that too. So I was just thinking, and that's not how you want to feel basically going into a workout, as your point. That
yeah,
you want to be
exactly.
energized and you want to have exactly. Okay.
Yeah, the main thing that I would like to emphasize is that people tend to focus so much on the immediate effect on body composition. You know, so like say like just let's compare us two diets that are identical in caloric intake. Let's say we're keeping it at maintenance, okay, and they're identical at caloric intake and macronutrient split, but the only difference is that you're consuming, say, more clean foods in one as opposed to more processed one the other. So first point I would say is that there's a lot of unpredictability in cheat foods. Okay, so when you have these clean foods that you're set up, it becomes a little easier to predict the macronutrients that you're getting, right? Because if you go out and order a pizza, chances are you're probably not going to get to track as the calories macros properly. That's a one fairly okay point that you can make about it. Another thing is the nutrient value of foods. Like say if you're eating ice cream and then it leads you to intake a certain amount of fat. Now, although in terms of grams of fat you may accommodate it within your macros, but the quality of fat matters as well, right? What kind of fat it is. So if you're eating 20 grams of saturated fat, it's not the same as eating 20 grams of monounsaturated fat in terms of quality of nutrition or the effect on on the. It's not saying that saturated fat is bad. I don't want to jump on. I'm not that kind of person
No,
who's going to jump on that bandwagon. But
no.
it's just the difference is obviously clear, and the amount of fat you eat in a day is considerably less compared to the amount of protein and carbs you eat. And you want to make sure that every little bit of fat that you're getting in is going to
Well,
be something that's
depending on
as
your
good.
yeah, that
Yeah,
depends on
okay,
the
yeah,
ratios you're
of
ascribing to.
course.
I mean, I've gone higher
Yeah,
fat
yeah.
before too, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
hear
no,
you.
that depends. Yeah, but in most cases, I'm just saying in a general diet, in a general maintenance or bulking diet or whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
it's pretty much going to be the same like that. Uh, and more, yeah. So then the point is that maybe the a difference in the quality or the sources of your food, it may not affect your body composition immediately directly, but it can definitely affect overall health and different aspects of your physiology, such as your energy levels, how you feel throughout the day. Because a lot of people, when they have a slow release carbohydrate or a complex carbohydrate, they tend to feel a little more satiated. They tend to feel little, the energy levels seem to be better. Blood glucose seems to be more neutral. Whereas if you have if you have somebody taking processed carb, it's very often that you find them feeling hungry more often. The energy levels don't seem very good. So, and this can obviously indirectly affect your performance. So it
Hmm.
can directly affect your performance and indirectly affect your body composition. So to look at a certain dietary practice and say that it's not going to make me look different directly, if you also consider the indirect effects of it as well, right?
Exactly. I agree.
Perfor-
Uh,
Mhm.
um, now, oh, first of all, I just want to get. I mean, we've talked about it before. Clean eating. That we're throwing around that term because that's sort of the term that's been applied by the people that practice it. It is. It's almost as ridiculous as if it fits your macros. I mean, foods aren't really clean or dirty, right? I mean, you sort of said whole foods are more less processed foods versus processed foods. So the term clean eating, just for viewers out there, we're using that term because that's sort of how people understand it. In my opinion, anyway. I mean, what what is a clean food? Does that mean it's been laundered, or? But anyway, so that it is kind of a vague descriptive term, but that's sort of how people understand it. Now, I wanted to get into meal timing. Does it matter? Can you eat all of your, nutrients and calories in one meal a day, and over the long term, will that make any real difference in body composition versus, uh, your 3 meals a day or like 6 times a day, or does it matter what foods you eat at what times of day? Will that make any significant change in your body composition?
Okay, first point right off the bat, theoretically, maybe it can be possible. Again, I would like to see a little more research on this because I'm yet to believe that theoretically eating at one meal I don't think it's practically possible, first of all. And even if it was, I don't think from a practical standpoint, it would affect overall the way you feel, the way that your day goes, probably affect your performance in the gym. So theoretically maybe, but practically definitely not. And talking about the importance of meal timing, let me give an example. And this is an example I like to refer to. Let's talk about the metabolism of fructose. Now, before anybody, now I know a lot of IFIM guys and a certain person that they follow, I've been speaking a lot against fructose, and I'm not speaking against fructose. Neither am I talking on the same lines as Dr. Lustig. So don't start bashing me right off the bat. But just taking the example of fructose metabolism. Usually, when you ingest certain carbohydrate in, the body stores it first in liver glycogen. Certain amount of glucose that floats in the bloodstream is utilized for immediate activity, of course, but then the remaining, first the storing process starts with storing in the liver glycogen, followed by which it goes in the muscle glycogen, which is a considerably larger storage space, and then finally whatever's left in balance is stored in fat stores. It's the same as equating, maybe say, storing cash at in your pockets, which have a very limited amount you can carry. Then if you want to store cash somewhere else, you can store it in a locker in your home, which is going to have a lot more space than your pockets do. And then finally, any extra cash that you have, you can store in the bank, and that's an unlimited storage space. So it's pretty much the same way. With fructose, on the other hand, fructose metabolism occurs entirely in the liver, right? So when you ingest a certain amount of fructose, it gets metabolized in the liver, and it has to be stored in the liver as liver glycogen. If the liver glycogen is full, the metabolism of fructose does not allow it to be stored into muscle glycogen. So immediately, if the liver glycogen is full, the next outcome that's going to happen is that whatever's remaining is going to be converted into triglyceride and stored as fat. So if you just take that example itself, if you're eating fructose, obviously you're not going to eat. People don't eat absurd amounts of fructose, but I'm just giving a small example just so you know that it does make a certain amount of difference. That if you ingest fructose at a time when your liver glycogen is full, say maybe after you've eaten a meal or two or somewhere down within the day, then the balance, whatever's left, is going to be converted into fat. Whereas if you eat fructose at a time when your liver glycogen is probable to be not full, for example, after a long fast or maybe just after getting up from sleep, for breakfast, then chances are that whatever fructose is there in that particular meal or whatever you're eating will go into liver glycogen and has less probability. Again, it's about probability, but it has a less chance of going into fat stores. So that itself shows an example of how eating meal timing can make a difference. It may not be extremely significant. It's not going to, like, if you're going to eat a fruit during some other time, you're going to get fat, as some people would like to call it, or many orthorexic bodybuilders would like to believe. But it does make a certain amount of difference. And this is again talking about from a physiological fact, a point of view of physiological fact. This is not even accounting for how a particular food may make you feel, how it affects your performance, how it affects your mood, how it affects your appetite, which all tie into various aspects of performance and the various aspects of the way you go about your day, which can indirectly, of course, affect your progression and end outcome as in your physique. So I think definitely meal timing and composition does matter a bit, but I'd say it's more to do with practical aspects and individual differences, more so than as far as what the evidence suggests till now, that more so than physiological general statements that we can make across people.
Excellent. So if you were to summarize then, in conclusion for this argument, if comparing if it fits your macros versus the clean eating group, what sort of advice would you give, or how would you sort of conclude that argument, sort of in favor of one versus the other, or is there some middle ground, or if people are looking at, like, what are the most important elements of each? Like for me, like in my videos, I would argue, and I think you would agree, that if you have a physique goal, a body composition goal, tracking your calories and your macronutrients, it is important. Like knowing, yeah, exactly. So I mean, the people that say it doesn't matter what calories you get as long as it's from clean sources, that's pretty. It's pretty easy to prove that wrong. You can't eat as much as you want as long as it's clean, and somehow calories don't matter. They matter.
That's absolutely false. Yes.
Yeah. So obviously the flexible dieters got that right. You just like you track any training goals in your progress, you track your food. But so where is this middle ground, or what can people take away from this when they're looking at, when they're comparing if it fits your macros versus clean eating, or is there a middle ground there?
Okay, so let me start with certain pointers that I would like to give to both sides or both groups. First of all, the clean eating guys. If your critique about IFYM or flexible dieting is that it allows you to eat any bogus crap, it's not that way. So get your facts right first. Will something happen to your body, or will your hormones go out of whack, or will something massively happen to your body composition if you incorporate a certain cheat food within the limits of your macros while making sure that you're getting your requirements there? No. There are people out there who eat McDonald's every single day, meal in, meal out, and they're fine. And it's not like you're going to have one meal like that and you're going to drop dead. So a lot of people tend to exaggerate many things in that side. So I don't exaggerate things. Be open to the fact that a lot of evidence may break certain pre-held beliefs of yours. Be open to that and make sure to utilize it. On the other hand, guys who are following IFYM, do not jump on the bandwagon to the point that you say that it doesn't matter at all, because there are many factors that may be beyond the realm of immediate effect on body composition that should be taken into consideration. I would say that if you do it, I think it's great to incorporate whatever you're doing, and I incorporate it as well. But the thing is that you need to take into account, maybe we need a little bit more research into the physiological effect of it, and maybe especially in around times when you're focusing on performance. Say a pre-workout meal, you probably don't want to have Pop-Tarts over there because it may probably not make you feel too good. Maybe a post-workout meal when the insulin sensitivity is a little better, maybe when you're done with your workout and your performance is not that much of an issue, maybe then you can incorporate a meal over there. So I think there's a certain middle ground that needs to be found. I also think that a lot of research needs to be done on specific impact of food on various hormones. I would really like to go into study with endocrinology, and I will be doing it as soon as I get some time. And when I do, I'll probably have a better idea and better understanding of the impact of foods on individual hormones. But until then, this is my advice to both groups.
Excellent advice. If people want to find out more about you, or learn a little bit more about your other content you have to offer, where can they connect with you online?
Sure. For anybody who wants to connect with my work, just go onto my website, www.sebastianfitnesssolutions.com. And that's my blog, and I post a lot of articles over there, so you can check me out there. And I have my YouTube channel, so you can just search the same name, Sebastian Fitness Solutions, or go ahead and find the username, Sebastian Fitness SLNS, and you'll find me there as well. And finally, on Facebook, the same thing, facebook.com/Sebastian Fitness Solutions. So just go ahead and just type in just search those terms for me, and you'll find everything, all my content right over there on the web.
Excellent. I'll post all of the links down below as well in the description section here. Definitely go check this guy out. Sunit has a wealth of information and content on all those sites. Your blog site is excellent, by the way. Great articles there. So like him on Facebook, and definitely subscribe to his YouTube channel. And Sunit, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Thanks. I look forward to connecting again soon. All right. Have a good night.
Absolutely. Good night.